This special meeting to order, committee meeting agenda. Quite a few items on the agenda tonight, but just before we get going into the agenda, I'd like to welcome my fellow city councillors and Colin McLean from the Journal Pioneer. Welcome, Colin, and Mr. Thibodeau from CBC. Staff members, we have a number of directors here tonight. We have our CAO Rob Philpott, Director McFarland, and Deputy Chief Walker from the Police Department, and the Fire Chief Enman, and our Acting Director of Finance, Kristen, is with us. And we have Brian Harlick here running the controls. And welcome to the members of the public. And we have two staff members here, Thane and Linda from Tech Services. And we'd like to welcome our viewers on YouTube. I guess we're seen around the world now and all across Summerside and all over. So welcome to all. And at this point, we'll turn it over to the Chair of the Planning Board, Councillor Brian McFeely. The floor is yours, sir.
I thank you, Your Worship. And we will call the March 3rd meeting of Planning Board to order. And we'll ask for a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Ramsey, that the agenda be approved as circulated. And just for the public's information, the voting members of Planning Board are Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Adams, His Worship, and myself. Other councillors certainly have input, but those are the four voting members of Planning Board. We have three items on our agenda tonight, Your Worship, so we'll move right into those. The first one being the rezoning and discretionary use application for 373 Duke Street, and the recommendation. So we'll move into that and the supporting explanation. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to allow row housing, maximum of 8 units per building. The applicant is proposing a 8-unit row house. Row house means a building that is divided into 3 or more vertically adjacent joined dwelling units separated by a vertical wall, with each unit being constructed directly on grade. Row houses do not require individual public utilities for each unit, street frontage, and cannot be subdivided. Background: an application was received from PEI Ocean View Resorts Inc., Shishong Lu, for a portion of PID number 309344 to amend the city zoning bylaw, zoning from single-family residential R1 to medium-density residential R3 zone. A public meeting was held on February 27, 2020, and Council gave first reading on that same date. Report: under Section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, when Planning Board reviews a zoning bylaw amendment, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw. Staff comment: if Council approves the zoning map amendment from R1 to R3, the applicant will be permitted to construct a row house subject to a discretionary use approval and the development standards of the proposed R3 zone. The discretionary use approval runs simultaneously to the rezoning application, as the public notice process is the same for both the discretionary use and the rezoning. The discretionary use being requested is for an 8-unit row house on the subject property, single story with garage for each unit. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment: the rezoning conforms to the official plan, Section 5, subsection 1.1, residential zones. The objectives under that particular subsection is to promote all housing types in the city. The policies related to that, the following are Council's statements of policy. 1, promote a sufficient diversity of housing types, residential densities, and tenure options to meet varied segments of market demand. 2, require that all housing be connected to community water and sewer services, except that where it is impractical to make connections in an agricultural zone. On-site servicing may be utilized in compliance with minimum lot size requirements under the PEI Planning Act regulations. C, suitability of the site for the proposed development. Staff comment, the site is suitable for a medium-density residential land use. A public street and municipal services are available for this development. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment, the properties to the west are zoned R3 and R4. The abutting property to the east is zoned R1 and is owned by the applicant. The property to the south is zoned R1. The property to the north is zoned R4. There is C2 and institutional properties located nearby. The subject property is zoned R1 and can be developed as per the R1 development standards. The subject property is privately owned and is not designated or zoned as green space. And there's an attached map there that shows the subject property. The subdivision known as Hunter's Estates was developed in 1988 under the Town of Summerside bylaws. The subdivision was a mix of R1 and R3 zoning. The developer of the day chose not to develop the subject property at that time. The proposed use of the subject property was R1 single-family residential, and the map shows that. And the other map that's attached there as well shows the lots around there. I don't know if there's any comments from staff on those maps before we move on. We're good? Okay. E, any comments from residents and our interested persons? Staff comment, a public meeting was held on February 27th, 2020. The public meeting notice was advertised in the February 15th edition of the Journal Pioneer. 24 letters were mailed to 18 property owners. Sarah Pickle, 389 Curry Drive, asked if the rezoning would impact the neighboring property assessment values. She also expressed concerns of the site safety during the construction phase, as there are small children in the neighborhood, and wanted to know if the contractor would be securing the site with fencing. Patty Arsenault, 350 Jardine Street, referred to the subject property as green space. She asked that the demographics of the applicant was targeting for these rental units, and if a fence would be constructed as part of the development. Jason Pickle, 389 Curry Drive, asked if the poles along the rear of the subject property would be removed. The applicant spoke at the meeting and provided clarity to some of the questions asked by the public. The concerns raised by Sarah Pickle, Patty Arsenault, and Jason Pickle are addressed in this report. F, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking and parkland for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment, the water main fronts and is adjacent to the subject property. The sewer is shallow along the property. The developer is required to ensure the sewer grades will work for the development. Electrical services can be provided from Duke Street or at the rear of the property, as power is available at both locations. The city requires the poles to remain at the rear of the subject property. G, impacts from the development on the pedestrian, vehicular access and safety, and on public safety generally. Staff comment, the development will have 4 double driveways with access to Duke Street. The development will meet the minimum setbacks for vehicular access from the nearest intersection of Tower Street and Duke Street, providing the driveway nearest Tower Street intersection will require a minimum of 12-meter distance from the south boundary of the subject property. The additional traffic as a result of this development would have minimal effect on Duke Street. Culverts may be required for the accesses. If so, the developer will be responsible for the costs, not covered by the city. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, fences are not a requirement for this development according to the city's bylaws. I, impact on city finances and budget. Staff comment, this is not applicable. J, other matters as specified by this bylaw. That's not applicable. K, other matters as considered relevant. Staff comment, the city bylaws do not require the construction site to be fenced unless the building of walls are within 2 meters of a public right-of-way. This is not applicable for this development. The current R1 zoning allows for a 2.5 meter, 8 feet side yard. The proposed R3 zone for a row house requires a 3 meter, 10 foot side yard. The applicant is proposing a 7 meter, 23 foot south side yard for the proposed row house, which exceeds the development standards for the R3 zone. The applicant explained the development would be similar, if not higher end finishes than the development to the north of the property. There is no data that supports the property assessment values being impacted by this rezoning. Recommendation, technical service staff recommend that the application from PEI Ocean View Resort Inc. Shishang Lu for a portion of PID number 309344 to amend the city zoning bylaw, zoning from single-family residential R1 to medium-density residential R3 zone be recommended to be approved by council, and that the application for discretionary use for an 8-unit row house be recommended to be approved by council. As per section 5, subsection 10B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. Now, the planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. The planning board recommendation, this bears the recommendation of the planning board, and we would welcome a mover and a seconder, and then open the floor to questions. Moved by Councillor Ramsey, seconded by Councillor Adam, and we would open the floor to any questions from council.
Could I ask you a question, Mr. Chairman? Just,
Sure.
I see on one of the maps there, in this location, the lots look like they were subdivided one time, or is that just a proposal?
That was a subdivision layout at the time. The developer didn't proceed with these
Oh.
lots along Duke Street
Okay,
or the two at the rear.
so they don't have to be made from 3 lots into one. You just didn't go ahead with it at the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
They just
Thank you.
didn't proceed with those.
Thank you.
And the map shows the orientation of the property in relation to the Arsenault and the Pico properties there as well. Councillor,
There was a question on the poles. I think that was last, I wasn't here, I don't believe. I was just wondering, were those electrical poles that we're talking about? Okay.
and they would remain, as I understand.
They would
it,
remain,
yeah.
okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you. I see that a couple of the ladies asked about the construction phase and would there be a fence around, because there's a lot of children in that area. Is that something that we can ensure, or we could ask, or we could, or is that out of our hands?
It's not a requirement of the bylaw, so there's no, the developer wouldn't be compelled to do it, but I would ask staff to comment whether it's, I mean,
Yeah.
we can
What-
ask. I suppose.
Like, what does that look like, Linda, usually in a situation like that, where there's a new build, and is there some kind of something put up to protect?
It's like any other residential development. There's not normally a fence, construction fence required unless they were going to leave.
Like an
the
open
site plan.
hole.
Exactly.
Right, which makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Any other questions at council? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda or Thane, the night of our first public meeting, I believe it might have been Miss Pickle, at the end of the meeting did have a question or two, and we weren't sure of them and had mentioned maybe contacting technical services. I think there was something about a small little piece of land. Would that be allowed for an entrance or whatnot to their property, I believe? And I just wondered if there's been any contact.
Oh, we haven't been contacted, no,
Okay.
since that meeting.
Okay, maybe she changed her mind. I wasn't sure at that time and just indicated checking with you folks. Thanks.
So if planning board approves this tonight, then it would be approved to go to council on at our monthly meeting on the 16th, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think yourself and Councillor Ramsey had mentioned it, even though it's not required by bylaw, but could we ask that one of the residents in the area concerned or would like to have a fence during the construction? You no problem in asking, even though we can't force it. And they may go ahead and go along with it to have it.
I think that would be up if you want to ask them, but like I say, that it's not required as a part of the bylaws.
I agree, and I think Councillor Ramsey agrees it's something we could ask for. We certainly, you know, the applicant is not compelled to do it, but it's certainly something that we
Right,
could
and
express an interest in seeing happen.
And if there wasn't an open space, it wouldn't necessarily be a concern, right? But and I hope that they would never leave anything open anyway. So, and then, so I know that, and I wasn't here for the first meeting, and I apologize for that, but, so this evening, the floor is open to us. Is it also open to anybody that might want to have anything
No.
to say? I know Patty's out there, and I don't know.
The opportunity for public input was at the public meeting.
Okay,
You know, unless there's new information
Right.
to bring to the
Okay,
floor
and I wasn't-
that wasn't raised at the previous meeting, and if all of planning board unanimously agrees, then we would open the floor to the public.
I
So
just wasn't sure.
unless
Patty, is there
there,
anything
they
that
seem to
you,
know
anything new that you?
if anybody has any new information to put on the,
Coffee yesterday with Vance Bridges, and he lives on Rita Mary, and he told me as long as they make those buildings with 9-foot ceilings, he's for it.
He's good with a 9-foot ceiling. That's the
Yeah.
only thing new. Okay.
okay,
Okay. Thanks, Patty.
okay.
Thank you.
Just want to check.
I know.
Can we just check on one other thing?
Yes, certainly,
okay.
Deputy Mayor, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chair. The other thing, I believe at the public meeting, there was one question asked, and I just want to verify it. The comment was asked about the completion date, and I think there was an answer given, an approximate answer might have been Miss Morrison. I think it was 10 months, and I just wanted to verify if that was spoken and into the minutes
10 months?
of the first meeting. Is it 10 months? Approximate completion date of the row houses? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? If not, is planning board ready for the question? Been moved and seconded that the recommendation go to council for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Motion carried, your worship. So we'll move on to the mobile sales establishment application.
Just so everybody's clear, I see if they leave, the next, when it goes on to council, if we just give the date,
16th, Monday the 16th.
but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you leave, just want you to know.
Like you all would.
Monday the 16th. Thank you.
Monday the 16th. It will go to council.
That's fine, we're not mad.
Okay, moving on, your worship. The next recommendation to discuss is the mobile sales establishment application of Colin McKinnon. Supporting explanation, purpose. The purpose of the application is to allow a mobile sales establishment, Haas's Fish and Chips, to operate at Heather Moist Drive, exact site to be determined, from June to October, weather permitting. Mr. McKinnon's proposed hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Sunday. Background, this is Mr. McKinnon's 6th year applying for a mobile sales establishment license, and to date there have been no issues with his business. The location being proposed is owned by the Summerside Port Corporation, Inc. And the accompanying map shows the properties that are owned by the Port Corporation. A mobile sales establishment means a business location located in a motorized vehicle or movable structure that is towed or moved by a motorized vehicle where all of the goods, wares, or foodstuff that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle or movable structure, but does not include a lunch truck. Report. Under Section 13, City of Summerside Licensing Bylaw SS-05, the bylaw states the following. Mobile sales establishment license. A, any person or company seeking a license to operate a mobile sales establishment in the City of Summerside make application therefore to the council. B, licenses may be granted for a mobile sales establishment to conduct business on a maximum of 2 locations in the city, and each application shall be accompanied by a letter of permission from the owner of the property on which the mobile sales establishment will be located. Council shall allow or refuse the application based upon consideration of safety, desirability, impact on established businesses in the city, public convenience, and such other considerations as it's deemed appropriate. Council may attach terms and conditions to the approval of the license if granted, including but not limited to hours of operation, health code requirements, litter control, and approved locations. E, the license for a mobile sales establishment shall be valid for the calendar year in which the application is made only. A new application is required to council for each calendar year. F, no appeal shall lie from a decision of council respecting a mobile sales establishment license. Staff comment. Mr. McKinnon will provide written permission from the Summerside Port Corporation, and a site will be determined prior to his license being issued. So the recommendation from Technical Services staff recommend council approve the mobile sales establishment license to the applicant, Colin McKinnon, to operate the Hoss's Fish and Chips at Heather Moyse Drive on property owned by the Summerside Port Authority, Inc. As per Section 5.10 B, subsection 3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. The planning board recommendation, this application bears recommendation of the planning board, and we would ask for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Adams, second by Councillor Ramsey, and we will open the floor for questions from council. Councillor McDougall.
I just had one, and we had the same issue last year. When we read that, it says motorized vehicle and everything is supposed to be contained in. I'm not picking on Haas, but they all have another trailer or some kind of a structure to carry everything. So I think we either need to adhere to the bylaw or change the bylaw.
Yeah.
I'm okay either way. It's just that it was a concern I had raised last year from somebody, and I passed it on. So
You're right, and most of them are in conflict with the bylaw because
Right.
most of them do have a storage area.
Yeah.
of some description. Councillor Adams was next.
I had 2 things. That was, one of them was the alternate storage structure that they have on site. The other one is, I'm just curious because on social media it refers to 2 Guys and a Grill and also City Food Truck and now Haas's Fish and Chips all going to be operating at this address. So is it just Haas's Fish and Chips, or is there like different ones?
The only one on the agenda here,
Okay.
this, besides the next one we'll hear, the only one for the port properties is Haas's Fish and Chips.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Councillor McDougall's question, the building is, the establishment is that they're offered for sale or contained entirely within the motorized vehicle. So he's not selling anything out of that, out of the storage trailer. He just keeps his store supplies in there, but he's not selling out of that.
So your interpretation is then that a storage shed is permitted as long as they're not selling out of that shed?
I would read it the other way when it says that are offered for sale.
So,
Nothing in the storage shed is for sale, right?
well, Once it's moved over to the other place, it's for sale, so.
No, what I'm saying is the wares or foodstuffs that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle.
It's not if you've got the other wares in the,
But wouldn't, he
He's only
couldn't,
selling from
yeah.
one place.
couldn't he have them anywhere though, guys? Like he could have them home in a shed, or he could have them in a building beside his establishment, like, does that make, like, I'm just trying to make sense of it as well, but it doesn't seem
no,
to
and
make
I
sense.
don't want to make a big issue out of it. It's just that you end up with two structures where we've basically granted one. And anyway,
So maybe we can come back to this after we've heard from council.
yeah,
'cause we
yeah,
need
I'm
to-
fine.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask the question. It came up several times from a few of the different organizations, restaurants, whatnot, around that area. And I'm looking at the section of the policy or the information recommendation, health code requirements. Are there going to be any kinds of washrooms provided? Whether they're portable or not. And my reason for that is some comments were made last year that when people had to go to the washroom, there wasn't anything available. And while I have only heard the information secondary, I know that there were times, and again, I agree with Councillor McDougall. I think it's a great thing. I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I want to verify for this summer season. Some of the liquid products were being poured in the manhole area. And I think that if there was a problem, that could be something that would happen, that the city may have to run into repairs, or if there was any kind of plugging or whatnot. So I just wanted to ask that question since we're reviewing the application. Has there been any discussion?
To my knowledge, there's been no issue with him. I'm not saying that he doesn't have.
And I don't know. I mean, there were a few different stands, and I don't want to make any comment one way or the other. But with the applications coming in, the two very important points that I've heard, are there washrooms that are going to be provided? Because sometimes I believe what has happened is other establishments are asked, can they use their public washrooms?
Yeah,
And
so-
the second thing that people have made comments to me as of last summer was that there was observation made of liquid being poured down the manhole covers. So I'm wondering if they have any kind of, setup where those kinds of things are looked into, whether there's a, some kind of a barrel where those things are gathered. I just don't want to.
So is it the comments relating to the liquid, is that the proprietor throwing it down there, or or customers?
And as I say, I did not see it. That was passed on to me.
So we could put a condition on the
Yeah.
applicant. Councillor Snow?
I'm just circling back to about the building or the other. I think we need to make sure that we're not making things too difficult for people to do business within our city. So when we start talking about bathrooms and facilities, I think at the end of the day, if the property is maintained in a good state, we're going to talk about some stuff later. We have business people within our city just trying to make a living, and I think we really need to take into consideration how easy it is to do business in our city, and we want it to be easy to do business in our city. And I think food trucks and of the sort adds a vibe or a feel to our downtown and to the city as a whole to make it better. So I think we need to just be careful as we think about stuff, because we can make things pretty difficult for people and they'll move elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Snow that we want to make it as seamless as possible for people to do business, but we also need to protect against things that are inappropriately.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say as well. Certainly, we welcome any of the establishments, whether they're mobile or year-round, but I also think that we have a voice that we have to also support year-round businesses that are there. And, you know, they have to provide all of these in their health standards in an establishment. So that's why I'm asking those questions. I think they're very welcome, but we need to ask those questions up front.
So we should deal with this particular application if there's issues with the policy, then we can deal with that as a separate.
Just one other thing, it says a calendar year, but I think we've asked for June until October or something. But it is valid for the year,
Yeah.
right?
Correct, yeah. What was happening before, some of them were applying in July, say, of this year, and they thought that was good until valid until July of next year, so it's
Right.
just for a calendar year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you ready to move forward with this application? And I don't know if we want to maybe ask tech services to take a look at some of that wording to provide clarity for council and for applicants. Yeah, just that it's consistent and we administer it fairly. And how do we deal with the concern about the proprietor pouring things down the manhole? Into the storm sewer, I guess, is...
Could there not be anything just with some of the you know, the precautions for the city, because that's our infrastructure underground, and I think if it was just a very respectful comment that we would say to anyone, because we don't want to prevent anybody from having a business, but we also have a lot of very expensive underground infrastructure.
If he was,
I don't know if it was
You're going down the
him.
sink if he was in
if it was gray water, it would be acceptable to go in or what have you, so we could make a condition in it basically saying that if he is going to discard of anything into the city system, we'll be notified.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Planning board ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. And our final item, your worship, for planning board is a mobile home establishment recommendation for Redbridge Farms. And I'll bore you with reading the same material again here. The supporting explanation, the purpose of the application is to allow a mobile sales establishment, the Mama's Kitchen, to operate at 225 Reed Drive on PID number 406439. The background, the location being proposed is owned by Redbridge Farms and Landscaping Limited. The mobile sales establishment is a trailer-style establishment. The menu promotes local products. The application is for the 2020 calendar year to operate year-round, weather permitting, and the proposed hours of operation will be 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. This is the 4th year the establishment will operate with no issues to date. And the accompanying map shows the location there. Mobile sales establishment means a business located in a motorized vehicle or movable structure that is towed or moved by a motorized vehicle, and where all the goods, wares, or foodstuff that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle or movable structure, but does not include a lunch truck. The report under section 13, the City of Summerside License Bylaw SS-05, the bylaw states the following. 13, mobile sales establishment license. A, any person or company seeking a license to operate a mobile sales establishment in the city shall make application therefore to the council. B, licenses may be granted for a mobile sales establishment to conduct business on a maximum of 2 locations in the city, and each application shall be accompanied by a letter of permission from the owner of the property on which the mobile sales establishment will be located. C, council shall allow or refuse the application based upon consideration of safety, desirability, impact on established businesses in the city, public convenience, and such other considerations as it deems appropriate. D, council may attach terms and conditions to the approval of the license if granted, including but not limited to 1, hours of operation, 2, health code requirements, 3, litter control, 4, approved location. E, the license for a mobile sales establishment shall be valid for the calendar year in which the application is made only. A new application is required to council for each calendar year. F, no appeal shall lie from a decision of council respecting a mobile sales establishment license. Staff comments. 1, Red Bridge Farms and Landscaping Limited is the property owner at the location chosen, the mobile home establishment. The Mama's Kitchen is an affiliate company to the property owner. Recommendation. Technical service staff recommend council approve the mobile sales establishment license to the applicant, Red Bridge Farm and Landscape Limited, to operate the Mama's Kitchen at 225 Reed Drive, as per section 5.10B3 of the zoning bylaw. The planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. In the planning board recommendation, this application bears the recommendation of the planning board, and we would welcome a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Ramsey, seconded by Councillor Adams. And we'll open the floor for any comments or discussion. Hearing,
And it's just, I think the same should apply for everybody
Yeah.
applying for this license. So I'd like to see the same rules go with everybody, if that
Yeah,
make
they-
it fair
they-
across the board.
and they have a storage shed there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we will call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. And with that, we would move for adjournment of planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we move right into tech services. I believe Councillor Duran, the floor is yours, sir.
And thank you to Thane and Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Call the March 3rd Technical Services meeting to order. Do we have a mover to approve the agenda? Councillor Snow, and a seconder, Mayor Stewart. I think we're the only 3 members anyway. So that's good. I guess we'll move ahead with it. 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first one being dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly property, which, of course, we've had our fair share of conversations about. But this first one in particular, it's been in quite a state for some time, and that, of course, is the former Holland College building up on Granville Street. I believe Councillor Snow requested that we have a chat about this evening, so I will hand that over to him.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. So what really started this, other than the fact that being a resident of the city of Summerside for as long as I can remember, and it being something that has been discussed through several councils, and point of contention with many people within our city, what really started is twofold. We started to talk about properties within our city that were dangerous, unsightly, and wanting to get things done, mainly the old government garage property, the now garbage disposal spot, and several houses. But for some reason, the Holland College building seemed to not be discussed. Most recently, the developer is moving on other properties within the Charlottetown area, which is great for the Charlottetown area. But unfortunately, the property that he owns here in Summerside continues to be neglected severely. I did a quick Google search today just to see what would pop up, and I have articles dating back as far as January 7th, 2011. That's when they wanted the property secured, and I'll give Mr. Banks credit. They did secure it with the fence and some boards. And then the one most recently where a squatter was in there and there was a fire, which then in turn put the life of our firefighters in danger, having to go into a building that is very unsafe and dark, so on. There's one here from January 16th, 2018, where the developer states that he has big plans coming for the property, that there was going to be apartments built, and on that date he said he should have more of the plan, or more of the plan should be revealed in about a month. So that was in January 16th, 2018. We're now in the year 2020. Back in May 8th, 2017, the former councillor who represented my ward brought this to then council and mayor's attention, asking for council to do something along the lines of exploring a tax hike on vacant properties. And for whatever reason, I think it was supposed to be brought back to our department heads to do some investigating on how that would work and what options lay for council to address it. So now we are here. I don't even know what the date is. What are we? We're into March of 2020, and it looks as awful as it did back in whenever. There's some statements in some of these articles where Mr. Bank pushes back every time the council comes to him saying, you know what, it's not being policed properly, people are breaking into it. At some point we need to hold him, the owner of the property, accountable, and any property owner that comes in and buys up property within our city, they have an obligation to maintain that property, keep it safe, and do business appropriately. That's not the case, I feel, in this situation. I feel it's being set on, and hoping. I know internally we've had some, dialogue about the property, but we cannot continue to kick this down the road. I spoke with a reporter last night, and I think I misspoke, and I said something like it must have been 20 years, because that's what it feels like. It feels like it's been forever. I think he bought the property back in 2007, maybe 2008, so it's coming on 12 years. But it's sitting there, and there's been some stuff going on around it, which is great, but the main property continues to sit there, continues to be an eyesore. It's dangerous, unsightly, and it's in a very significant area of our city. So I would really like to see us as a council do something. It appears that it continues to be pushed on to the next council. Next council might be timing of elections, but it is something I heard lots of, and I continue. And it totally happened by itself, but when I brought it up, what happened was I had a Facebook post went out the other day. It coincided with the Guardian article on him looking to develop some property in Charlottetown, and I responded to their article saying, Mr. Banks, please come develop your property in Summerside, and I meant that. I would love for him to come and develop it, and that's the whole point of it. But from that, the public has reached out, and they've expressed their frustrations with it. And a petition that was started by somebody asked me if I started the petition. I didn't, but somebody found it appropriate to start a petition, and it's gone on far too long for us not to address it. So I would really like to see us consider looking at ways that we can address this, whether or not we move to vote the CS11 that it's dangerous and unsightly, and figure out ways we can address it, or how we do it. I don't know. I do like the thought of a tax increase on properties that are sitting vacant. I think we're starting to see that more and more, and we will continue to see that if we don't do something. So I would love to hear what my fellow councillors have to think about this property, but I know I am one that would like to see something done while I'm sitting here this term, maybe the next term if I'm here or wherever I am, but I would like to see something done now. So.
Thank you, Councillor Snow. Certainly agree with you over here on this side. I won't read word for word like I did a couple of community meetings ago, the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly property bylaw, but I know that there's parts of that bylaw that say that we are within our rights to do certain things. Now, dangerous, I know there's a fence around it that might eliminate the dangerous, but it's certainly unsightly. It's got to be hazardous. I don't know what building materials are in there, but it's got to be hazardous. So, you know, I'm happy to see what might come of our talk here tonight if ownership is receptive to it, but if not, I'm certainly in the near future more than happy to put a motion on the floor to, quite frankly, bulldoze the place to the ground, because, you know, it says we can do things like that in the bylaw, so, you know, we'll see what comes of it, I guess. Deputy Mayor McCollum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I appreciate Councillor Corey, you bringing that information up on that particular property. I know last night we just went through our budget presentation, and one of the things the city has made as a very high goal is that we do want to develop empty buildings and properties. And I think sometimes we have discussed the fact that when maybe groups or people buy property and they're buying it on speculation to see what the market will bring later on, I really believe one of the things that we need to review is our bylaw and have some type of a date, a specific date when somebody's buying property, because right now we have empty commercial buildings in our downtown core as well as up on Granville Street, and that's an impact on our revenue, and we spoke very much about that last night. So I certainly applaud you for bringing that forward and would support any further discussion on anything that we could do to move that forward.
Councillor Ramsey?
Yes. I have some real concerns with that property and with our firefighters going in there not long ago and being in grave danger from talking with the chief and what they went through and crawling under lockers and ceilings falling down and glass on the, you know, they were not in a very good position in there. I have concerns about our young people finding their way into that building and being hurt, and squatters. And anyway, I'm pleased, Councillor Snow, that you brought this forward, and I'm certainly in support of it, and look forward to some further discussion with council on that.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Oh, a couple of things. One of the things I wanted to mention earlier on too was there's something common on 2 or 3 of these properties, and that is that they were both owned by the provincial government, and it should be a responsibility of theirs to make sure when they sell these properties that they're going to fit into the community and they're going to be developed at a certain time. We just dodged a bullet from the old manor up there. Kind of looked, it sat around for 4 or 5 years, but same with the government grades and different places like that. I think there's more responsibility for the government in the I know where we've sat with banks a couple of times and discussed different things, but I think at one time you did clean it up, put the fence around it, but if you notice, it's funny how little things will stick in your craw, but there's one large tree that wasn't cleaned up after the hurricane, and that's right in the GD lot up at Holland College. So that, to me, that shows disrespect for the city and the property. So I think time's up, I think, to put a push on.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
Just to follow up on what everybody else said, and I agree completely with Councillor Campbell, we appear to have been, for lack of a better word, a dumping ground for like the manor, the government garage, and the Holland College property. I think we really need to, and when we are being told, and it's obvious that we are in a housing crisis, we really need to get people that are serious to come to the table to see, because these buildings can be repurposed. They might not have been purposeful for what they were at the time. The manor needed to be updated, the government garage and so on, but they can be repurposed and used, and they were all in parts of the city that would be perfect for housing. So I guess I would just encourage, and it's really disappointing that Mr. Banks has sat on this as long, but, you know, I'd encourage if anybody can, you know, reach out and work with him. If he obviously doesn't want to develop that himself, maybe he could reach out and partner with somebody or lend somebody a hand that would want to develop it for housing. Anyway.
Councillor McFeely.
No, I think this is timely, and I think you're right that, you know, the time's come where we've been certainly trying to work with the owner to, you know, move things forward. Things aren't happening. I'd like to see maybe staff do a report so we understand what our legal options are. And secondly, I know that there's been some work done in terms of what other municipalities do in terms of the double taxation and all that kind of stuff. So I'd just like to get an understanding and appreciation of what our options are moving forward. And one of those options, not the preferred option, is obviously to work with the developer to get something done. But if that can't be, then what other options do we have in our toolkit to move forward and try to resolve the issue? Because you know, you hear not only from our own residents, but you hear over and over and over again from visitors to the city what an eyesore that place is. And you get a beautiful city, and you got that stuck in the middle of the commercial, one of the main commercial areas of the city. So there has to be something that we can do going forward.
Maybe your department, tech services, I think, have worked on a couple of properties to make it more attractive to develop.
Yeah.
Through taxes and encouragements and stuff like that. So maybe we get something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McFeely. And just we'll go to Councillor McDougall and Mayor Stewart and Deputy Mayor again. Just to add to Brian's point, the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly property bylaw, I don't know how many times I've read it over the last handful of months, I guess. It's quite clear in that bylaw, and it's not a very long read, but it's incredibly clear what we can and cannot do as a city and as a council to, you know, if developers aren't willing to work with us, it's quite clear what we're allowed to do. And I think it's, like you said, Councillor McFeely, we certainly want the developer to do something on their own first before we have to get into that. But like Councillor Snow said, it feels like it's been 20 years. So
yeah, the issue for me is, though, it's clear what we can do, and the property owner can bring it back to a safe environment. But it'd be like the old government grants. You know, they can bring it back to a point where it's safe, but it's still damn unsightly. And it doesn't deal with what we need to have dealt with, is to get the damn thing developed in a positive way, as opposed to just putting a few boards on windows and making it safe. So that's my concern, is that the bylaw doesn't have the teeth in it to get it to the next stage that we need to get it to.
and it does, as far as the dangerous component of it, yeah, it's easy to get around it, but there is some things in there under the unsightly part that might have a bit more, like you say, teeth. Like it deals with how it affects the surrounding property values, and if it's generally puts a bad, visual component to the city itself, which it does. So I think, like I say, I don't think there's a lot when it comes to the dangerous part. It seems to be a pretty easy thing to get out of, putting up a fence and boarding up the windows, but there's no question that it's hazardous and it's unsightly. So we have those other two, hopefully in our favor.
And I'm just squeezing this in there because I don't have a lot to say, but it's only safe until our firefighters have to go back in there, and then it's no longer safe. So even that safety part is not safe, right, for people who have to respond to anything.
Councilor McFeely.
Thank you, and thank you for putting this back on the agenda. This is, Councilor McFeely took the words out of my mouth over there, but, you know, we just don't need this brought back to, you know, a certain level. We need something done. And, you know, we are a new council and we have a new CAO. I would suggest that we request a meeting with Mr. Banks and let him know our concerns face to face, and let's put some ultimatums going forward. I like the taxation increase myself, but those have got to be explained, and we should have a face-to-face meeting with Mr. Banks. So that's what I would recommend. Thank you.
Thank you. Your worship?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some quick comments. I guess the main problem since it was turned over was the asbestos problem. And I think some of this responsibility goes back to the government of 12 years ago, whomever that was. But how they could turn over a building like that to the private sector that wasn't environmentally approved or cleared. And that obviously did happen. But this asbestos problem is scaring away the developers for the last 12 or 14 years, whatever it is. So I think, and you had mentioned the economic part of it as well, as the safety and everything else. But we've had a building there closed and boarded up and fenced up for the last 12 years or whatever the date is. And the city, before that, there's no taxation on the school. It was a school. But the dollars that the city lost, if you will, because it wasn't developed into a residential area or whatever, and there's 14 acres there. Couldn't you imagine the tax base the city could have gotten, number one, and number two, with a lot of people moving into the city. And so the building is still vacant, and if I think as a city, we got to step up to the plate some way, shape, or form here, and think how we're going to do it. But it's costing the city a lot of money on no taxes that we're collecting in the building, and dealing with the other problems. So, but I still think there's some responsibility here in the provincial government for turning a building over with a health problem or an asbestos problem before it was environmentally cleared, and we're stuck with it. But anyway, that's all I have to say for now, and I believe CAO is probably thinking about something. I saw him take another seat. Maybe he's going to speak up.
Just to follow up on what I've heard here, certainly we'll reach out to Mr. Banks and have a discussion with him about council's concerns. Just some historical perspective as well, and Councillor Snow alluded to this earlier, that I think it was back in summer of 2017, the former CAO had done some research around what other jurisdictions are doing around taxation of vacant properties, and that information was shared with council at the time, but I don't think there was any follow-through, because shortly thereafter there was some discussions that started to percolate with Mr. Banks around the property, but then that never really went anywhere. Then we had a change in government, and here we are. But I'd like to be able to share that that research with you, and so that you can reflect on it and see if there are things in there that council probably could consider as well. And we certainly will bring back options, legal options for council to consider as well.
That's what we want, legal options. Councillor McColman, did you have?
Just one last thing. I think every comment that each council member, Mayor Stewart, has made is really, really important in CAO. For some of the older council members, Mayor Hazel McCallion was 93 when she retired as the mayor of Mississauga, 4'9" and very outspoken. And I guess what I feel is what we're trying to say is when we came on board as a newly formed council, we wanted to try very hard to be a council of change. And this is an opportunity for us to try and get the people together and also send that message out that you know, it's a problem for us as a municipality when, you know, when people come forward, because we want to be open for business. But when it sits and then it becomes run down or empty, not being developed, it becomes a bit of a danger or safety issue, then I think it's really incumbent on us to speak up, because it is our community and we're losing tax base as well as opportunities.
Councillor Snow?
Just one last thing. I think myself and Hazel have a lot in common because I'm 4'0" and she's 4'0". I don't mind speaking my mind, but I think we're not giving Mr. Banks enough credit here to say that we're scaring away developers. He is a developer. He bought the land. He's responsible to develop the land, do something with the land, take care of the land. And I just hate that we continue, and I'll be honest, it feels like we're pushing it down the road. I'm looking very much forward to hearing what city staff have learned from researching what other municipalities have done, because what we have done till this point has not been enough by no means. And that's just my opinion. Meeting with Mr. Banks to let him know what we feel about the property, again, sure, that's a great idea. There's been lots of comments in past articles where I read that there's been meetings and Mr. Banks thinks we should meet and work with him, and I assume by the talk, and there was a plan here of a new development that he had mentioned that he was going to tell us a month later back in 2018. I would assume there's been lots of meeting. I assume there's been lots of discussion, and it's still nothing is being done. So the talking to him and meeting with him, and it's great if we can find some way to get something done, but eventually we need to have a strong voice and let people know that this stuff is not acceptable in our city, and I really don't think it is. So I look forward to moving forward on this quickly, because it's been a very, very slow and long process.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, I don't think the city is scaring away developers. I meant the asbestos in the building is scaring developers because of the cost.
But I guess my point is, Mr. Banks bought that building, and as a developer, he would know exactly what was in that building when he bought it. So to say now, oh, it's full of asbestos, I can't develop it, it's going to cost me too much, I think that's not fair to the city of Summerside. You bought it in that state, so you're now responsible for it. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. I think he's responsible to do what's right to the city of Summerside and develop it, sell it, figure a way to fix the problem that is now his and ours, unfortunately.
The asbestos thing was talked about, I remember at the time, that it was full of it and the building was turned over or bought or sold. But anyway, that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Are there any other questions or comments on that? If not, we'll anxiously await what comes back and go from there. Hopefully that'll happen sooner than later, and we'll do what we have to do within our rights to do so. And like I said before, I'll be happy to be the first person to put a motion forward in enforcing whatever we can enforce. Second item on technical services agenda is the former government garage property at 149 Pope Road. I had received an update from Aaron back on February the 12th. It was just in response to a resident that got in touch with me asking for an update on the property. So I thought, well, why not share that update tonight so everyone is aware of it. CAO Rob and Aaron met with Mr. Gordon, there he is, met with Mr. Crosby, the owner of the property. It would have been February 11th, and Rob had forwarded Aaron a summary of that meeting, and Aaron forwarded it to me to forward to the residents. So there were lots of forwards happening, but I'll just kind of summarize it here for the public and for everyone here. The bay doors have been repaired. They've also replaced some of the windows in that area. The bay area of the building has been cleaned up. And they're now operating out of that area. They've built a wall to separate that area from the rest of the building. Occupational health and safety have been by recently, and they are pleased with the progress that's been made so far. Work has started on the interior renovation of the remaining portion of the building, interior demolition and cleanup, as well as some electrical work has started. And he now has a contractor committed to do this work, as well as the roof repair. That was a big reason, I guess, for some of the delay at the beginning, getting a contractor that was, had the schedule and the time to do it. That work that was just explained, it isn't visible from the road. Obviously, it's interior work, so although it might not appear that there's as much going on inside, there in fact is. The roof work is supposed to be happening in early March, so we're there now. We'll see what happens there. The trusses have been ordered for that quite some time ago. And they also said that they're going to make a big effort to keep the vehicles in the yard more in line. He stated that he is running a business, and it is a garbage waste business, but will do his best to keep the property looking its best. He plans to keep and repair the former salt dome. That's the brown dome that's got a big bite out of the side of it. He's going to use it for storage, so some of the things that are out in the yard don't have to be out in the yard. There were a couple of fire-damaged trucks that have some very valuable assets remaining on them, and in them, just different parts that are usable, and he plans to reuse those on his existing fleet. He does have 4 additional new vehicles ordered to add to the fleet, but it takes time for those to come in. They are specialty vehicles, kind of like fire trucks. They got to be ordered and built and made and delivered. So that's the update as of February the 12th. I had reported that to the resident that asked about it, and the resident was happy to see that there has been some progress, but I just wanted to share that with everybody and any other resident that might be listening or watching or reading about this. So that's where we stand as of February the 12th.
Sorry, Councillor, just one final piece I want to add for the rest of Council is, as Councillor Duran has said, a lot of the work that has gone on is primarily interior. It wouldn't be visible to folks who are driving by. But the roof work, which is the most visible piece, I guess you could say, is supposed to be happening or starting early this month. So we have made a point, and we have advised Mr. Crosby of this, that we will be circling back with him sometime this month to see how things are progressing on that front.
Thank you, Rob, CAO Rob. And I do think that residents do realize that it is a industrial operation in an industrial area. So I'm just I'm happy to see that there's work being done on that. And I know a couple of residents that I was talking to, they are quite happy to hear that as well. Are there any other questions or anything on that? We're certainly going to keep reporting on it as we approach spring and summer and construction season and renovation season. Your Worship, did you have anything, or are the lights just on for show?
No, it's on. It's controlled over here. The light,
Okay.
The light is always on, I guess.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we will we'll close up the technical services meeting. Do we have a motion to do that? Councillor Snow, and seconded by Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue on. I believe Councillor Snow, you have the floor, sir. Community Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll start off with the approval of the March 3rd agenda. Somebody to approve the agenda? We only have one item on here, Lifehouse, and some of you might be thinking, what the heck's Lifehouse? I haven't heard of that before. But it's a group of ladies. So I did do a little write-up here. I'm going to read it and just give you a quick overview of what it is. So myself, along with CAO and Mayor Stewart and members of the Summerside Police Force, met with a group of ladies recently that are working on addressing an identified need here in our city. They met with the city in the hopes that we would look at possible ways that we could support their group in helping address the need to establish a woman and children's shelter here in Summerside. So their group is working on establishing the shelter, and their name of their group or the organization is Lifehouse. So I'm going to give you a brief history. I spoke with the ladies today and asked if they mind if I read just a brief history on why they started this, where it came from. So on February 6, 2019, residents of Harbour Terrace condominiums observed a young woman in distress on the boardwalk in front of their building. They offered her assistance, brought her in from brutal cold, warmed her, provided her with food, dry clothing, and began to search out options for accommodations for her. In conversation with our local police, it was identified that she could be transported to a women's shelter in Charlottetown. When it was identified that she would possibly be transported by taxi, 2 of the condo residents offered to drive her to Charlottetown's women's shelter, Blooming House. While there has been no further contact with this young woman, she has not been forgotten, nor have the circumstances of the situation been forgotten. This encounter with such vulnerable individuals remains the incentive and momentum for 4 local women, Margaret Fowler, Kathleen Terry, Susan Durash, and Lydia Cahoon, to pursue efforts towards securing a much-needed women's shelter here in Summerside. The committee has established Lifehouse as the chosen name for the future shelter. The province recently went through a process of getting a report compiled. It's called Findings of Community Needs Assessment on Emergency Shelters. The report has shown that the need is there for additional services. Members of our local police force that were at the meeting have confirmed that there is definitely a need, both male and female, in the city of Summerside. Problem is, current services are all centered out of Charlottetown. Community organizations recently got almost $3 million for housing initiatives from the province. I have an article here, and all those organizations were Charlottetown, east, nothing west of Hunter River. And as we all know, it's not just a Charlottetown issue. All the organizations that did receive money are great, and they do great work in their communities. But my question, and why I'm bringing this up today, is whether there's a fair and equitable distribution of resources, particularly between the 2 municipalities, say Charlottetown and Summerside. I would definitely say no, given the article that I read saying that $3 million went out, and we know these ladies expressed to us that they submitted applications to the province. They were asking the province for some feed money, some startup money. They came to us as a city asking us if we could do something financially to help them find if there's any other locations that we might be able to, like a building, because that is a main part of going to the federal government for funding. My feeling is the province would be well aware of this, and they need to step up to the plate. It's not a Summerside thing. I believe we as a city should be doing everything we can to help, but these are primarily provincial and federal responsibilities. We need the funding to flow as easy to Summerside as it does to Charlottetown, and I think right now, for the last little bit, we've been sort of shafted a little bit by the province in some funding that's not been coming our way for certain things. This is a much-needed initiative for our city, and one of the concerns that was brought up during the meeting is that, you know what, there are men in our city that are also homeless, but that doesn't take away the fact that we shouldn't be focusing on this application as well, because the hope is that this will spur other people, organizations to realize the need, and then hopefully a shelter for men as well. But as we know, on cold nights, it's not the best thing, and we need to find a way that we can help these people if we can. But the main reason I brought this forward is it ticks me off a little bit when you see $3 million, a big announcement that, you know, we're going to give money to this group, that group for housing and homelessness, but none trickles our way when there's an established group of women who've been working very hard to get something off the ground, and they're not asking for a whole lot right now, so it's very frustrating. What I would like to see us do is I would like to see council send a letter in support of this group to the province, seeing if there's any interest in them providing some support to the group, knowing that they're coming to us asking for support. We need the province to be on board, or even more so than we are. So I think that would be a great start to assisting these ladies. Anybody that has any comments or suggestions, anything regarding it?
I think, Rob, if you remember a meeting we have at the Boys and Girls Club, I think it came out in our discussion that there's too many of these little things we keep running to the government about. If we could bring in the ministers and because we are getting shafted in a lot of the supporting decisions that the government should be taking. And I think it'd be much more beneficial for us to do it in a one big ask or an explanation at least.
Councillor Ramsey?
Thank you. Yes, Corey. I've also met with those ladies 4 times over the last year, and I missed that meeting last week. I wasn't able to attend, and they're working hard. They have some real concerns, as do we in the city of Summerside, as residents, as councillors, as mayor. I mean, we all know, as our city police, we all know what's going on. And we've been trying to help. I've made many, many suggestions to these ladies and trying to get something started. And nothing seems to be working. So I totally agree with Councillor Snow that if maybe could put a letter forward to the government and see if we could just get them some kind of help, get them started. As Councillor Snow said, they're not looking for a whole lot. They'd like a little direction. They're brilliant ladies. They know what's going on, so they don't need a whole lot of direction. They need some funding, and they need some support from us as City Council. Thanks, Corey.
Worship?
Thank you, Councillor Snow, and I did sit in on that meeting, and they did make a great presentation, and really want to work to help. And so I thank you for bringing it up today, and hopefully you know, if a letter can be prepared to the government to see what can be done. But we did see the large amount of dollars that went out and where they went and where they didn't go, sort of thing, and it was kind of obvious. So anyway, I think a letter and then maybe a meeting as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Coleman.
Okay. I'm also glad that you brought it up for discussion, Councillor Snow. I think I might have had a few phone calls from those same women. And at that time in the conversation with them, one of the things that I did say is it is really a provincial responsibility. It doesn't mean that our community would not be supportive of it, but the organization that I worked with before I retired, one of the things that we were told very often is that there is only enough funding to house one shelter for women. But the unfortunate thing, and we heard this a lot as frontline workers, that when somebody is in a community that they're familiar with and they don't have transportation or their supports are around an area, it's very difficult for them, especially if there's children involved. And I think our community is big enough, but we also need our provincial counterparts to step up to the plate and recognize that there are needs here and that it's just sometimes not conducive for people to have to go to another region in order to get the supports that they need. So thank you for bringing it up, and I'm glad that we're, trying to push it forward.
Councillor Adams?
And the same, thank you for meeting with them. I couldn't make it that day, but I did want to ask, or you had mentioned about sending correspondence to the government, but I think it's probably also really important that we send it to the official opposition as well, as those are our representatives in government at the time. So
I should note one of our local representatives did say that there was some stuff on the table in discussion that didn't make it through the House, but months ago. But still, we need to express our concern as a city when there's funding being handed out, that it's done equitable. Especially, it'd be different if there wasn't a group of ladies sitting there wanting to get something off the ground, but there's a group of ladies really wanting to work hard at something that is, let's face it, a provincial and federal responsibility, but they're willing to do the work to get something that's needed, that the government just compiled a report on that says, yeah, we need more beds, we need more shelter space. So yeah, I would agree and make sure that the opposition and sitting government get a letter
I think sometimes also, Councillor Snow and members of council, I can think of other different specific groups where there were certainly needs around addictions, where there were, you know, a lot of different things, and local people worked very hard to bring that information forward and went to a lot of meetings to Charlottetown and, you know, did a lot of back and forth. And unfortunately, the facilities that they had hoped for and the beds that they had hoped for adults in those situations, it ended up going to another region. And I think it's something that with the city, we really need to be a strong voice and an advocate, that if we, you know, are supporting it through a letter, that we're aiming that it would be something that would be reflective in this area.
If there's no other comments, I'd call for adjournment.
Thank you, Councillor Snow. We'll continue on with police and fire and emergency planning. Councillor Ramsey, you have an item on the agenda?
I do have an item on the agenda. But that item is Councillor Snow's, and I'm going to make him wait for a minute because he's talking too much tonight anyway, don't you think, guys? No, I'm teasing you, Corey. I just have something to say before I bring that forward, and it's been a year since our first drug awareness forum, and one of the great things that came out of that forum was the idea of placing a police officer at Three Oaks High School, and I'd like to thank our PEI government for working together with the city of Summerside and cost sharing for the officer to be in place, and I look forward to their help again this year. As this has proven to be a very successful program, and I look forward to the province helping us out one more time. The other need that came up from that drug awareness forum that was apparent was the need for a women's recovery center here in Summerside. On July 2019, I submitted a proposal to our government for that particular need. In January this year, I submitted it again. The same proposal to our health minister, and I'm just awaiting a response now. Just wanted to let folks know that our next drug awareness forum will be held Wednesday, April 15th at 7 o'clock at Three Oaks High School. It's going to be an interesting evening, and I'm putting more information out next week. I've just spent the last 2 days getting things together. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, and now I'll get to our agenda item, which is Councillor Snow, I believe, CS 15 Animal Control Bylaw. So do we need Deputy Walker to come to the...
You can if you wish.
Would you like to... Thank you, Sinclair. You're here, you might as well get to work, eh? So I'm going to pass this over to Councillor Snow, and
yeah. So I don't have much to say about it other than over the last year since being elected, it is something that has come up several times, either within my ward or from people in the community out and around. So there's been a couple issues of animals off leash that has caused some significant issues within our police department, time-related wise. And then I had a call the other day from a gentleman that lives in my ward, very close to the boardwalk, with the concern that, you know, he's seeing daily animals walking along the boardwalk, using the bathroom, owners continuing to walk by and not picking up after their dogs. He's a recent, he moved here just recently from out in BC, and he had told me some things they do in BC, everything from, you know, picking up the feces and sending it to their local vet clinic where they do DNA sampling, and then the owner is charged, like something that drastic where it sounds ludicrous to think of. But I said to him when I was talking to him, I said, you know what, he was looking at some bylaws in Charlottetown, and it's something that really concerned him, and rightfully so. He walks the boardwalk every day. He has his own dog, and said that, you know, has caused some issues with him and other people when they're walking, because he's a respectable dog owner, and he sees others just using the bathroom and walking off. So as light as the issue might be, and I'm almost laughing about it myself in regards to the bathroom issue, but I think it might be time that we look at the bylaw as a whole and see what we have in place to enforce, or how we are enforcing it. I hate to see, it's a continuation of a plea I've had for almost, I guess we're going on 2 years now, but I hate to see our police services, and wasting their time is not the answer, but spending their time doing this, when we could have other people, say like a bylaw officer in place, that would be dedicated to this and other things. But I would like to see us do a review and see what police services feel are ways that we could police it going in the future, and what we could do bylaw-wise to make sure that people who are breaking the bylaw, it's enforced, and it's something that has some teeth, as in other things. So I just sort of, I just sort of wanted to bring it up for discussion, because it is an issue that I've had many calls about, and I've said it, and everything from, dogs being off the leash to people feeling, people aren't following the bylaw as it's set out, and rightfully so. It's a tough one to police, seeing that the dogs are usually off their leash, and by the time the cops get there, they're usually in the house or they're gone. But it's worth a discussion, just like anything. So
I may have a solution if they just flush the bathroom. Flush the toilet.
You're not barking up the wrong tree.
Teasing you, Corey. Anyway, floor's open.
So that's all I had. I said I'd bring it forward. I would love to see our bylaw policy review look at it along with our police and see what the plan is. We are coming into spring, and let's face it, we'll continue to hear it, or I know I will. The boardwalk's in my area, and it's an area used by lots of people walking their dogs and so on. So
What about all the, seriously, but is it just for dogs? I mean, what about all the crows?
Well,
I was just gonna bring that up.
But I think it's mostly dogs.
Do DNA.
But I walk down there quite often, and I meet an awful lot of dog owners, and most of them are very, the dogs, the owners, and responsible, right? There is the odd one, and, but I don't know the answer, but I know that the majority of them are very, very responsible. So, and whether we had a police officer down there, or a bylaw officer, or somebody with a shotgun, I don't know if you'd catch a whole lot. So.
Go to the bathroom before you come.
Yeah, I go to the bathroom.
Thank you. Thank you.
The two things
Councillor Bruce.
that I've heard about different times over the years is, especially with dogs on the boardwalk or around town when they're not on a leash and they do their duties. I have a family doctor in the ward that I represent, and he was very particular about that, because he said, we have a beach in the city. If little children are playing, or young toddlers or whatnot, they fall into it. We know what children are like. And he said, coming with that, there's a lot of germs and things like in their feces. So, I mean, that is a health issue that can be concerning to parents and children if they get into it. The other thing, and I know it hasn't been mentioned, but about crows. And I know I've received a number of phone calls from residents where they are just sort of making their home in the trees and all along the beach area and the boardwalk. So for the benefit of those folks that have sent in emails or called, I know that we are looking into some information and not sure if there's anything that can be done, but it is being looked at by our CAO, and hopefully we will have some information coming forth. But it's one of those things, what can you do?
There you go. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Unless, Sinclair, you have anything to say.
I can say is the fact about the dogs not being on a leash.
Yeah.
And there's no bylaw to cover that.
that would be important because, I mean, you would be able to control your dog, and if there was feces, at least you could pick it up. Like when your dog is running, say on the boardwalk, goes up in the snowbank and so on and so forth, you know, you're going to go up there and try to clean it up? Probably not.
Right.
You know, that's where you run into a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So I think it would be better if there was a bylaw in place to control the dog better on a leash.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And I think
Sinclair.
as Councillor Bruce, oh, sorry, Councillor Greg, just, you know, the owners, the animal owners, most of them, as you say, are very responsible. But all it takes is a few that can make it really difficult, and it gives the whole thing a bad situation. But I want to applaud the owners that are very responsible.
This is funny. Yeah, thank you, Norma. Thank you. Greg, did you have something?
No, I want to talk to Corey's department. JP just come in.
Oh, your light's on there. Did you? Okay. All right. So is that everything then on police? If it is, I'll, yep.
Is that everything then?
I'll
Jim?
adjourn, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to, unless,
Thank you, Sinclair.
anything further? I believe, Deputy Mayor, you have the finance
Yes.
comments?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I have two recommendations to bring forth, so I'll call the meeting to order. Do I need a mover and a seconder, maybe co-chair, vice chair? Okay. And I'll second it. The two recommendations that I have this evening, the first one is the direct allocation of gas tax funding, and I'll read that one into the minutes and bring that forth to council. It's the gas tax municipal strategic component applications for 2020. The recommendation is that council authorize the city's applications for funding under the gas tax municipal strategic component program as noted below. The supporting explanation is that the purpose is the province of Prince Edward Island through the PEI Infrastructure Secretariat has advised that the municipal strategic component program is open for applications until March 20th, 2020. For this intake of applications, priority will be given to wastewater, drinking water, and capacity building projects. The contribution formula for the City of Summerside would be to receive a maximum of 50% of total eligible expenditures. It is being recommended that the City of Summerside submit the following applications. Number 1, Reed's Corner lift station replacement. Number 2, Duke Street storm sewer, and the boardwalk revitalization. So I'll just put that out to council and open that up for any discussion.
Just, I had a question from residents regarding the East-West Connector. Is there anything going to be allotted to East-West Connector review with gas tax money?
Okay, I'll just check here with Director of Finance or CAO, Rob.
We have 4 years worth of gas tax money allocated for that project, starting with next year's allocation.
And that includes Polk and Central.
Yes.
Okay, so does that answer? Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from anyone in council? Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll read the next recommendation and then move it forward for the monthly council. Okay, the next recommendation is direct allocation gas tax funding change allocation for 2020-21 fiscal year. Council modify how the direct allocation of gas tax of $1,356,490 is apportioned for the 2020-21 fiscal year. This is required based on decisions made when developing the 2020-21 capital budget. Supporting explanation, the purpose: in October 2019, the City of Summerside was required to submit capital investment plans to allocate the direct allocation gas tax funds expected for the time period 2019 to 20, as well as 2023 to 24. Initially, the allocation for 2020-21 was submitted for the Central Street Pope Road redesign. The 2020-21 budget has apportioned the direct allocation gas tax totaling $1,356,490 as follows. Paving, $590,000. Storm sewer, $250,000. Sidewalks, $216,490. Intersection of Greenwood Drive, Pope Road, $200,000, and the intersection of Granville Street, Walker Avenue, $100,000. Direct allocation gas tax funds can be transferred to other projects as long as capital investment plans are submitted and approved by the Project Review Committee, which is a provincial committee. For example, if the City of Summerside decided in 2022-23 to apply gas tax funding to another project, a gas tax transfer request form would need to be completed. So I'll just put that out to members of council and Mayor Stewart, and if you have any comments.
That's pretty straightforward for every municipality to follow that procedure.
Councillor Duran.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I guess, because I'm a little unsure myself. In particular, the Pope Road Central Street project, is that, I know it was 200,000 in the budget. Is it 200,000 as well as the 1 point whatever million for 2021 gas tax?
Director.
Currently, it's $200,000, but we do have an application forward under the ICIP funding program, which we're waiting to hear back on.
Okay, thank you.
When, do you know, Director Kristen, as to when possibly we would get any feedback on those applications?
No, not at this time.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right then, so we'll, with Council and Mayor Stewart, we will be moving this to monthly council meeting on Monday, March the 16th, to bring that forward. Okay, thank you.
The day before St. Patrick's, right?
Right, before St. Patrick's Day storm. And thank you, everybody, for your attention, and I'll move it back to you, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I guess we've gotten to the end of the agendas. I see there's a couple items for the Committee of the Whole, but let's take a 10-minute, sorry, Councillor Campbell, you want to say a few words?
I just wanted to bring up Councillor Snow's department there. We've had a little trouble up in the park behind my place with the hall. Gentleman that showed up again, blocking paths and stuff. Just wondered if Gordon can kind of let us know exactly where we stand with it. He's got three piles of snow there now, cutting off the tracks and stuff.
Maybe JP may have more information on that, would you? What's the piles of snow are blocking the path? I didn't catch what you said there.
I would recommend that we would push anything like this back to Committee of the Whole for discussion, maybe.
Oh, it's on private property?
Yeah.
Okay, if there's nothing further, let's take a 10-minute stretch here before there's a couple items to deal with there.